let's be real. What do we actually need? Not much. When you look at people that have spent their whole life focused on things that really don't matter at the end of the day. So the job, the title, the money, the thing that they value the most is the thing that they end up spending the least amount of time nurturing.
Exactly right.
COVID forced Matthew Lumsden to reassess his life. So he changed everything.
This is the fork in the road.
Right.
So do I take the same path as everybody else and just go back to the office like nothing happened? Or do I see this as an amazing gift? My identity is not attached to my profession.
Right.
So
That's a really important point.
yeah, and society doesn't make it easy.
Matthew has embraced Japanese philosophy to transform his worldview.
And I turned to my host father and I said, what does Manzoku mean? And my host father was a serious man, and he turns to me and says, completely satisfied. And I thought, completely satisfied. That is what we should be aiming for.
From our studio in Jones Bay Wharf, Sydney, here's Pod O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Something's off with your life. Men feel it while sitting in another pointless meeting, or driving home from work feeling empty, or wondering, is this really it? You know it's true, but you do nothing about it. And if you're a guy in midlife, that quiet voice is about to get very, very loud. And it can get messy. We're brilliant at ignoring what we know. The career that stopped feeling meaningful years ago. The body sending signals we dismiss. The relationships we're phoning in. We tell ourselves we'll deal with it later, after the next promotion, after the kids finish school, in retirement. Except COVID taught us something. Later might never come. The trappings look good. The reality feels like a cage. Burnout disguised as success, a midlife crisis waiting to happen. This week's episode of Don't Let the Old Man In features Matthew Lumsden, who reached the top of the corporate ladder at Vanguard Investments and then walked away. He went from the corner office to regional Australia, from corporate prestige to purpose-driven work, proving that a life after 40 can be a beginning, not an ending. He's extraordinarily honest about leaving corporate, the identity shift, the fear, the careful planning around financial freedom that makes reinventing yourself possible in midlife. And he shared with me Shibui, the Japanese philosophy that guided his midlife career change, how simplicity, impermanence, and imperfection can transform not just work-life balance, but how you live. It's a masterclass in finding purpose beyond the paycheck and taking men's mental health seriously. I'm Pod O'Sullivan, the host of Don't Let the Old Man In, and I blew up my own career to go back to university in Oxford and study the one thing that nobody teaches us, how to get through midlife successfully instead of quietly dying inside. Think of this as your midlife learning podcast. Let's start here. Joseph Campbell, the author and the whole notion of the hero's journey, he talked about sometimes the beginning starts with the refusal of a call. The moment we know something is not quite right, we do nothing about it, and then it keeps getting louder and louder and louder, and then suddenly it hits you. And I often think men at midlife are terrified to move, but that call gets louder and louder, and eventually it gets so loud you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
You spent 13 years at Vanguard, at the ultimate of anyone's career.
Yeah.
And you have said previously you burnt out and wanted to change. What were the signs leading up to that moment that something wasn't quite right for you? Which ones were you ignoring and which ones did you suddenly go, okay, it's now too loud for me?
Yeah, I wish I had the perception to pick up on the signs as they were building. I think it was COVID for me because I was traveling all the time.
Right.
And I didn't even think of jumping on a plane from Melbourne to Sydney or up to Brisbane or off to London or the US for work. And I can remember this distinct conversation with a client leading up to the lockdown announcement. And I was still delusional that everything was going to be fine. I'd just got back from the US. Yes, there were murmurs around what was going on in China, but surely that's not going to impact us here, right? And I was still thinking, oh, I'm going to book a plane up to Sydney. I got a meeting on Wednesday and then I'll come home. Well, by Friday that week, we were told to leave the office, take our stuff. The likelihood is that we weren't going to come back to the office for the foreseeable future, work from home. And I'm having management calls as I'm walking out of the building and I'm thinking, what is going on? And I think that was the start of the realization that things were changing.
So at a global level, but also for you specifically?
And I think, you kind of jumped into this busyness of trying to manage kids at home from school, work, colleagues' concerns, but a business that was still operating, markets were still moving. So we still had to showcase that everything was okay, even though it really wasn't. The world was going through so much turmoil. And I think it was gradually as time went on and I wasn't traveling, then I realized, well, hang on, we're able to communicate with our clients via Teams or Zoom or whatever. Why am I jumping on a plane at the drop of a hat? And I think that was gradually something that that was the light bulb moment, but probably over 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I realized I don't need to do this anymore.
So do you think now, because COVID changed so much,
It did.
and I remember,
Yeah.
I remember that week you talking about. I ran a workshop with an American organization in Sydney, who had just a brand new managing director, and I was helping him in his first time in a meeting with his Australian leadership team.
Yeah.
And he had to step out I think it was 9 o'clock or something, and he came back a little bit ashen-faced. And he said to the group, this is confidential to the wider organization at this stage, but I've just been told by head office, no one's allowed to get on a plane until they're told otherwise. And we said, why? He's going, there's rumors the whole world's going to shut down the next day or two, so we're just being told. And the next day, I went down to the south coast, got a place down there.
Yeah.
The next thing, borders shut down. I didn't leave there for 3 months.
Oh my goodness.
Now, in my case, it was fantastic. I had 3 months on the beach, but that's not the point. Like, the world has changed so much.
Yeah.
So for you, do you think, had that event not happened, 'cause that forced you into a place you'd never been before, how long do you reckon you would have started before you noticed, I don't want to do this? Or were there signs in hindsight that you didn't want to do what you were doing?
I don't think that I'm any different to anybody else. I think I have the same risk that everybody else faces, particularly men, because we tend not to talk about stuff that's difficult, and we do kind of leave stuff until it's a crisis or critical, right? So I actually think from what was, and I think this is something that we forget, that COVID era was grim. It was really grim. Terrible things happened in our society. So many people lost their lives. So many people were ill. And there's still, I think, trauma from that period that will take years to unpack. I think the PhDs are only probably being written now because there's sufficient data. But I think for me, the time for introspection, just thinking outside of myself for a bit and saying, is this really what I want? And I'm an optimist, so I like to be positive. I like to hold on to the things that are good. And so I thought, you know what? there's something that is good about this experience with COVID, and we can work anywhere. And I got more time with my family. So I thought, well, rather than just going back, because that's what ended up happening, 2.5 years later, businesses started discussing mandates and you all have to come back to the office. And when those conversations started to happen at the executive level, I thought, this is the fork in the road.
Right.
So do I take the same path as everybody else and just go back to the office like nothing happened? Or do I see this as an amazing gift that stops me from working crazy hours until a point where I break? And we can get into the irony of that statement because I ended up pretty much doing that. But
that's right.
you have to learn the lesson sometimes yourself, even when you're giving the advice to others.
How did you bring your family with you? Because, a lot of people would say from the outside, look at where you were then and go, you've got life sorted. You're working in one of the most, successful investment firms in the world.
Yep.
You worked in UK, you worked in Japan, you worked in Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
You've changed functions from a legal
Yeah.
background to a commercial background.
Absolutely.
And now you're walking away from like the security of all that.
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
status of all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
How did you bring your family on that journey?
Oh, I think they were already there.
They
They were waiting for me.
Right.
So my wife is a women's rights policy advisor and has worked for herself for a long time, and she can work anywhere.
Okay.
So she was basically always in a position to pick up and move, and we'd done a lot of the moving internationally. And then it was really like, well, hang on, what do we want for our kids? What do we want for our family? And we'd had all of those discussions, and like many people, that plan was in place, and it was all delayed gratification. We'll get there, work hard, save. But then I think COVID gave us that opportunity to go, well, hang on, yes, that plan's there, but why don't we just accelerate it? Bring it forward.
Yeah.
There's a novel idea.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And I don't want to dismiss the question that you asked, because it's a really important question around, how do you kind of lose the trappings of having a great job,
Perceived trappings.
Perceived trappings. And I think that's the real key, right? Because let's be real, what do we actually need? Not much. And when you look at people that have spent their whole life focused on things that really don't matter at the end of the day, so the job, the title, the money, the thing that they value the most is the thing that they end up spending the least amount of time nurturing.
Exactly right.
And so, for me, it was a really easy decision, really. Leading up to it probably felt difficult, but in retrospect, it's the easiest decision I've ever made in my life.
Did courage play any part in that? I know you just said it was really easy in hindsight.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
There's moments when you have to go, hold on, those trappings that I'm about to let go, some of those are good.
Yeah.
I'm about to let them go.
But I've always been like that, in the sense that I'm not going to say that I'm courageous, but I have always taken calculated risks. And for me, it was a calculated risk. So, when you think about the dollars and cents, I moved from a high-cost city to a lower-cost regional centre.
Yeah. Port Macquarie is beautiful.
And all of the lifestyle benefits that come with that.
Yeah.
I'm then not having to spend an inordinate amount of money on dry cleaning every week. I'm not having to pay parking when I go to the airport every week to fly to Sydney. So there are so many things that are associated with, the role and the prestige of a big job.
Maintenance of that.
Yes, yeah. And so I think that's important to think through as well. But everybody's different, so...
How long do you think it took you to think those through? I remember you telling me once you were traveling up north and then you got insight, intuition or otherwise, that Melbourne might be shutting down, therefore don't come back to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Or you'll get locked in.
Yeah. We were in Canberra. We were in Canberra driving back to Melbourne after spending some time in Sydney. And the plan pre-COVID was always to move back to Sydney. I ticked it off with my boss, everything was sorted, and then we were locked down. So we did the first lockdown in Melbourne, then the first opportunity we had, we got everything, drove up, spent some time with my mother-in-law who hadn't met our 6-month-old daughter then. And so it was really important to get together as a family. And then we're in Sydney and I'm thinking, why are we contemplating a move from Melbourne to Sydney in the middle of this pandemic when we could just accelerate the pre-canned plan that we thought very carefully about that was going to be executed in 5 years? We just brought it forward.
Right.
And so we're on our way back to Melbourne because we needed to sort out a few things with the house, but we had kind of prepared ourselves. And, you know, we all have friends that are always in the know, and I talked to him and he's like, don't come back.
Whispers are Melbourne shutting down.
Yeah.
And for those listeners who are not in Australia, Melbourne had the longest shutdowns in the world during COVID.
Yeah, 263 days.
Yeah.
Crazy. And I remember saying to my wife, I cannot be knowingly locked up.
That's a good reason to do something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we turned the car around, drove to Sydney, spent the night with my sister-in-law. Next day we're in Port Macquarie, worked out of the garage of my mother-in-law's place for 3 months. And then we found a home in Port, in Paradise.
Wow. And there you are. After that, though, you left Vanguard to set up your own organization.
I did.
Before I jump to that, though,
Yep.
a lot of men struggle with the identity shift. And it's one of the most common conversations I have with people who leave corporate roles to set up their own business.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of identity they haven't realized sits in the role and the organization, or even just the office. You know, the meetings happen and these kind of conversations on a Monday happen with these people in that meeting.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm not there.
Yeah.
Where do I do that? What kind of identity shift did you notice leaving Vanguard to go and do whatever you did next?
I feel so lucky. Over the course of my life, I've had so many experiences when I was young that gave me an insight into, if I took this path, this is where I would get to. And so I graduated law school, I joined a big law firm and was on the path, and I saw the partners of the law firm and I thought, I don't think I want to be them. You know, they were working longer hours and they weren't spending time with their family. They were divorced. They weren't looking after themselves. And I thought, that's not what I want. And so I then used that as the opportunity to move in-house. And then ultimately I built a career.
So in-house meaning instead of advising into organizations, you joined an organization and became an in-house lawyer.
Yes, for an asset manager.
Okay.
And so that for me was an awesome mix of getting closer to the client, but also using my legal background and skills. But I moved more and more into the commercial side. Yeah. And I think, to your question, it probably led to me going, you know what? My identity is not attached to my profession.
Right.
So
that's a really important point.
Yeah. And society doesn't make it easy.
No.
Right? So once you're a lawyer and you disclose that to the world, you're a lawyer.
People stop talking to you at barbecues.
Oh, completely.
We could tell so many jokes right now about that. We won't.
So many. And the funny thing is, I laugh because I haven't been a lawyer for so long, but there are some people to this day that still make jokes about being a lawyer. And I'm like, but that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so to your question, right, I think Vanguard for me was probably the hardest transition because Vanguard is a mission-driven organization. So your values align with the organization. You believe in that mission. You're surrounded by like-minded people, and watch out. Once a decision's made, like, we're going there. And it's incredible. Like, it was an amazing company to work for. So the difficult thing was not necessarily identity, but there is a family
in the whole
feel.
environment. Yeah.
And so you lose connection with that family. And that was hard.
Yeah.
And, I actually think it's really interesting because I spent so much time with financial advisors talking about issues that they then address with their clients. And one of the things that I don't think we prepare people for well is that transition.
Just a quick break. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I hope you are too. What I've been doing with these episodes is a couple of days after I record the conversation, I sit down, grab my ideas, and I put together my reflections on the conversation and what I've learned from them and what kind of sense am I making from them. That's called my reflections episode. I also try an experiment to actually apply what I've got from the conversation. You can listen to that in an episode. You can also download a simple handout to help you do the same. Back to the conversation.
Your workplace becomes a second family. And so, you lose something there. And it was almost like a grieving process.
Yeah.
Like I haven't been divorced. Hopefully my wife sticks with me. But,
after this podcast, she's definitely going to.
So I feel like it could be an equivalent emotional reaction.
You're 100% right. I mean, one of the reasons we set up this whole podcast is for that, what you've just talked about. It's not the only reason, but it's one of them. And that is society historically and masculine identity as part of that is men are shaped hugely by the role we hold. And whether that's a carpenter, whether it's a tradie, whether it's a sales guy, whatever it is, we fall into that story, that narrative, that ecosystem. Our mates, our buddies are often the same people. For many of us, we grow up in that ecosystem and therefore we have lifelong friends. Our kids grow up at the same time, we're married at the same time, etc. And then you suddenly hit midlife, be it 40, 50, 60, you go, I don't want to do this for whatever reason. But we hold on to the, I will lose some of my friendships or my status, or I won't know what to do if I don't do that. And there is a grieving process, you're absolutely right. But part of the message I think this podcast is trying to portray is reinvention is very possible. You've just got to be, you've already said this, it's like you've got to be wise in how you go about doing it. It's not a rash decision. Like you do make considerations. But you don't jump 10 steps, you jump the first step, then the second step, and the third step. And you don't let go of the first thing before you do the third thing, right? And when you do that, the folks I talk to at least come out going, I am so glad I've done it. Like I feel so much better for these reasons than what I was doing over here. And it sounds like you're in a similar boat.
And it's not easy. But the hard things have to be done first. And you do have to plan for it. I get frustrated with the financial services industry at times because they're very focused on themselves when in actual fact, we need to get people better prepared for retirement and talking about the technicalities of the product offering doesn't help. And so actually people spend a lot of time thinking through the financial aspects for retirement, but they don't think about the heart and the soul. And that's the bit that that's why I say I was really fortunate really early in my career to get exposed to what I didn't want. And I find that is a really useful construct, because when you say, for example, why have you been put on this planet, or what's your purpose, or what's your mission in life? Whoa,
Big statement.
that's massive. How do I attack that? Whereas I think if you go, what do you not want to do? Yeah. People can tell you pretty quickly. That's right? So then you can build on that. Yeah. And then I think sitting down with a financial planner is a very good use of your time, because then they can help you build the financial plan that goes with your life plan. Yeah. And I think this is the thing, like, it sounds really big when you say, well, what's your life philosophy? But that's so key. Yeah. So what do you believe in? Because if you are clear on what you believe in or what you don't believe in, start there and build from there. Then you can start to build all of the components that go to supporting that. What do you want to do? Right. Okay. What do I need? Is it a lot of money? Or is it support from mentors or other colleagues? Or is it a particular job you're after? Or are you trying to build a business or a charitable endeavor? So I know it sounds really tough coming up with that life philosophy, but I actually think that's where most people need to start.
I'm 100% in alignment with you. We haven't talked about this on our podcast overtly, but it's on our website,
right.
wisdomvault.org website, where we talk about what we believe in. The whole podcast series, in fact, our whole business, is based on 8 pillars of what's called positive aging, i.e. how do you have a great second half of life? Yeah. Wealth creation is one of those, but it's not the one. No. It's one of those. Yeah. In fact, in our layout, it's number 6, but it's just one of those. Yeah. Sense of purpose is one of those. Yeah. Sense of positivity in yourself is one of those. Sense of community, giving back to community is one of those. Yeah. Philanthropy is one of those. Yeah. Physical health is one of those. But what we recognized, and indeed the doctors that I'm doing in Oxford, is all around that whole area, is wealth creation is a really important pillar to allow you to do the other ones that ultimately is where you're most interested in. Yes. A lack of wealth creation causes fear, which then stops you doing stuff that you really, really want to do. If you over-overt or over-index on wealth creation, you become obsessed with that, the status, the trappings. And as you said earlier on, most people eventually recognize they've over-indexed on stuff that's not really that important at the end of the day. It's important at some phase of your life. It's not that important, usually in the middle of your life. Yeah. So I 100% agree with you. Most people don't take the opportunity just to pause and go, what's really important for me now that I'm at the stage of my life where I can actually take time to think about it and plan. I know myself well enough to know what I want. I may not be courageous enough to take the next step, but at least I can go, hold on, let me just think about it.
And I acknowledge, right, in this discussion that when you have some money and you're comfortable, it's easy to say this.
It's easier.
Yeah. So I recognize that when you're in a position where you're still building your wealth, that's where you're at. Yeah. I guess the point I'm making as well is don't leave the planning that's associated with you too late. Because otherwise it is maths. Yeah. You run out of time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What's that phrase you guys in the finance industry use around the seventh wonder of the world is compounding.
Compounding interest.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let me just change topic a second. You mentioned when you were younger, you realized stuff. Let me read a quote out to you. Yeah. Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet. Yeah. advised a young poet once, and this is her phrase, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. And for many of us, the dragon isn't out there somewhere. It's kind of an unexplored part of ourselves that we've ignored. And maybe at some stage in our life, we should then go and explore it. And I reckon, knowing a little bit about you, your dragon had a Japanese accent.
I think you're right.
Because you've done something really interesting. You've written this really cool book called Shibui.
Thank you.
And we're going to give away 20 copies to listeners. Thank you so much for doing that.
No worries.
You told me that your love for Japanese culture started at age 5.
Yep.
Tell us that story.
And, a kid in West Pymble going to a Catholic school, OLPS, that offered Japanese. And, I think the student body was only just over 100. Like, how progressive and forward-thinking were they to have Japanese in their curriculum? And so for me, I just started learning Japanese and I was spellbound. It's just doesn't sound anything like English, doesn't have characters like we're used to in the English language. Incredible history, incredible culture, food, everything was different. And so I was just drawn to it. And so I continued to learn the language. And then through learning the language, which I still view it like a puzzle, it's a complicated puzzle. And as a result, I really enjoy playing around with that puzzle. A bit like that quote, it gave me an opportunity to look at things from an outside perspective. And I came back from a year in Japan when I was 15.
So you went on like a school exchange trip?
I went on a school exchange with AFS.
Okay.
I lived with a host family and went to a Japanese school and did everything that a normal 15-year-old high schooler does in Japan.
How did the host family treat this young Aussie coming across?
Just like one of theirs. It was phenomenal. And it's so funny. So Hiroko Nishida was the head of the selection committee at AFS, and she basically interviewed host families, and she matched me with the Yahagi family. And my host father and my father are uncannily similar.
Oh, they're right.
It's just ridiculous. Both larrikins, both love a joke, love a drink, love their food, and grounded by core principles that are very clear. So I have this distinct memory, and I can feel myself sitting in exactly the same leather sofa as I'm telling you this story. And he welcomed me to their house, sat me down, and he said, "Matthew, there are 2 things that you must do in this household. You're a member of the Yahagi family, so these are the 2 things that you have to bear in mind. You must be simple and honest." And, Shisoto seijutsu is the Japanese phrase. And I thought I understood what he meant. A couple of months later, I was learning calligraphy and I wrote Shisoto seijutsu on a scroll, which I still have today. And I only now think I really understand what he meant after many years and multiple conversations with him. And actually, when I was doing the research for the book, I sat on exactly the same lounge and I had this conversation. And I said to him, "Can you explain these rules to me?" And he said, No, they're not rules. They're expectations. They're a way of being. And, even just saying that gives me goosebumps now, because
it's a gravitas that goes
when
with
you
that.
think about that as a concept, it's a way of doing things. It's another reason I'm drawn into Japanese culture, because it's so deep, multifaceted, It's not a simple yes or no answer.
What do you think the 15-year-old version of you understood simplicity to mean versus what you now
That's a
understand it to
really
mean?
good question. I think he meant, keep it simple, don't get into trouble kind of thing, because he was worried about this young Australian going off and doing the wrong thing and then it having a poor reflection on the Yahagi name.
Yeah.
And I think the honesty bit I always viewed as just tell the truth, bit like what my real father would say, don't lie. But I think the simple bit over time is what has changed in my experience. And that's a lot deeper.
Right.
But I think for me, there's this great book called The Courage to be Disliked. And at the beginning of the book, there's a discussion between the student and the teacher. And it's a brilliant, brilliant book. And the student says to the teacher, "Why is life so complicated?" And the teacher turns to the student and says, "It's not life that's complicated. It's we humans that make it complicated." And, I read that passage. I thought, this is what it is.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid overcomplicating our life? And it's easy to say, harder to do, but back to what we were discussing earlier, it's like, what do you not want to do?
Yeah. There's a beautiful irony in all that. I've been to Japan 3 times, so nowhere near as much as you have. And I've only been there for, a week at a time. My son has just come back. He's been there for 2 weeks. He loves it there. And I've always described my experience in Japan is there's a nobility, which is what you were talking about. There's a simple nobility. It's one of the most, like Tokyo is one of the most safest global cities in the world.
Yep.
The respect for eldership is almost tangible. You can feel it.
Yeah.
And at the same token, you've got this corporate culture of the salaryman leaving the office at 6 p.m., then going drinking, then going back to the office to be seen. Which is not simple.
No.
That's not a simple way of thinking of life.
And sadly, there are people that work themselves to death.
And there's a Japanese word for that.
Yeah. So that's not great either.
Yeah.
But, I think this is the interesting thing about our modern world is that we attach certain things to certain places and people and we go, oh, they are the ones that we should follow. That is the model. Well, the Japanese aren't perfect. There's lots of things in the past that they're not proud of.
That's right.
Certainly, when it comes to aggression against their neighbors.
Yes.
But at the same token,
there's also that.
Let's focus on the good things. And I've had the fortune of being able to travel and live in lots of different places. And what I feel like I've been able to do is steal the good things from everywhere and hold those things dear. Because that we certainly can. Like, as human beings, let's copy the good and multiply that effect, as opposed to, I think at times, particularly with technology, we seem to use technology to broadcast the bad. And human beings, unfortunately, are wired to take in that negativity, when in actual fact, there's another great book, Factfulness. The world is actually a pretty good place today when we compare it to 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And we
Almost
forget
every
that.
Yeah.
We forget it.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to remind ourselves that we're actually very fortunate for the large part. There's obviously people that aren't as fortunate, but I think we build a better society by holding on to the good things and trying to multiply that effect rather than focusing on the negatives.
Let's just pause for a second. If you've made it this far, it must mean you're enjoying the show. We want to keep bringing you awesome conversations, but algorithms are like needy toddlers. They demand constant validation. So if you're liking this, please hit the like button, the follow button, the subscribe button, whatever button. It helps us land more great guests to keep entertaining you. And if you're listening to this on an audio podcast app, come over and watch us on YouTube. I promise we're reasonably photogenic. Back to the show. Using what you just said as a segue, I'm going to tie 2 points together. The notion of we should remember how far we've come.
Yeah.
Right? Remembering and building on good stuff. There's a notion in psychology called the autotelic self, the version of you as a child that you got most engagement with because it appealed to your intrinsic motivation. So for you, Japanese is one example. For me, was music and storytelling. Yeah. And we often lose that version of ourselves. And then if we're lucky, we start listening in our midlife and go, that was important, and you kind of go back into it. It strikes me that I'm not sure if you ever lost it, but you certainly re-engaged with it. Yeah. And you went back to study. You went there to work. I did. And then you went back later to research for your book. Yeah. What did that research trip where you went back, what did that help you do in terms of writing a book? But what did it also help you do in terms of you discovering you?
I describe it as one of the best trips I've ever had in my life. And so, if you throw a number of events into the mix, so we talked about COVID. So it was post-COVID. It was post-leaving Vanguard, which we've talked about, feeling like a family, grieving the loss of that family. And it was an opportunity for me to reconnect with, as you said, an area that I'm passionate about. I think when you have kids, you live vicariously through them. I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old, and particularly the 6-year-old, because there's a playfulness at that age that is intoxicating. Like at the beginning of the book, I say thank you to my daughter Laura for always making me smile. She always does something or says something that makes me smile. And so the trip was a solo trip, and there's no way my kids would have put up with the number of temples I went to or the Tokyo and Kyoto summer heat, 38 degrees, humidity so high. Yeah. It's actually an awful time to go to Japan, and I hated it when I lived there, but it almost felt like ritualistic in the sense that it was hot, I was sweaty, I was walking 30,000 steps a day, going to all of these temples and museums, doing research on Shibui. And it was so quiet. And I don't mean the places I visited.
No,
because it was...
Tokyo is not renowned for its solitude.
And parts of Kyoto now are so overrun with tourists. But I wasn't going to all the tourist traps. And when you walk up into the mountains of Kyoto, there's almost 2,000 temples in Kyoto. So people say to me, which temple should I go to? It's like, well, take a pick. It doesn't really matter.
They're all great.
But the thing that I do encourage people to do is, by all means, go to the famous ones, but go to one that you've never heard of and walk from the train station to the temple, and there will be this quiet. Because, you talked about Japan being organized and clean, and almost it could be an incredibly chaotic place, but because of their culture and disciplined way in which things are done, there's order to the chaos. And so you walk...
And there's this pride in the order as well, isn't it?
Incredible.
And that's what astounds me.
Incredible.
There's an extraordinary movie, which I can't remember the name. We'll put the picture into the video when I can.
Sure.
It came out a year ago. The movie's all about... there's two stories. The second story you don't realize till much later. But the main story is a midlife guy whose job is a toilet cleaner.
Perfect Days.
Thank you. It's brilliant.
Amazing.
But the pride he takes.
Oh,
You get the toothbrush in the mirror and he's cleaning behind the
Yep.
public toilets.
yeah.
And if you've never been to Japan, the public toilets are a work of art. Like, they're extraordinary.
Some aren't, but
True. Well, I don't know. I haven't been to those. The ones in the movie are amazing. But the pride in the order is what I keep reminding me of it.
Well, and can I pick up on that? Because I'm sure there are plenty of other places in the world where this is also true, but Japan does take it to another level where everybody, regardless of the role that they play, they take tremendous pride in what they do.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I don't particularly like about our society is we look down on certain jobs. We look down on, bus drivers or, garbage collectors. Whereas in Japan, everybody is doing an important job,
Yeah.
and society sees that everyone has an important role to play in how that society operates.
Yeah.
And so there's none of this, well, at least my perception is that what we do doesn't happen to the same degree. And so as a result, the bus driver is incredibly proud to greet you when you get on the bus.
It's their bus.
Yeah, the person that's packing your bag at the supermarket takes tremendous pride in ensuring that nothing's going to slip and your eggs are going to break before you get home. They even put a piece of sellotape over the top or sticky tape to seal the bag so that everything is perfectly packaged. I think that, stealing the good,
Yeah.
that's
Steal
something
that.
we should steal.
Yeah.
Because everyone in our society chooses a role or a path. And if we all then go, this is my contribution to society and this is what I'm really proud to do, then let's support everybody in their chosen endeavor.
Speaking of philosophy, tell us about Shibui. What is Shibui? Because what is Shibui is question number one.
Yeah.
Question number two is not one of the most written about groups of philosophies in Japanese. There's other philosophies that are more written about,
Yep.
which is why this is intriguing.
So Shibui doesn't have a direct English translation, for one. There is a literal definition which is actually tied to the astringency of an unripened persimmon, shibugaki. But that's where I won't stretch that literal meaning too much, because it starts to get complex, and one of the central features of Shibui is simplicity, or a refined simplicity. Now, I thought it was ironic if I started to talk about Shibui, but then I lost people by virtue of a complex definition around Shibui. So that's why I came up with this 4-factor definition, essentially, which I call the persimmon principles, so tied to that taste of astringency of a persimmon. And so it's, in my view, after all of the research I did, there's 4 key components. There's others, but just to keep it simple. So simplicity, subtlety, imperfection, and impermanence are all aspects of Shibui. And I probably should say, Shibui is a concept that applies to things generally. And yet, those 4 elements, to me, can apply to life.
Yeah, which
they
you
can
do.
apply to business.
Mhm.
And so I thought, why don't I have a crack at applying it to life and business? And so that's how the book came about, and I then developed it from there.
Well, the first time you gave me this, and I'm sure everyone who picks it up has the same experience, you go, oh, hold on, where's the start? You're like, oh, it's over here. Which of course it is.
Yes.
It's a Japanese influenced book, so
Yes.
of course it is.
Yeah.
Tell me about that decision, and what did the printers think when you were putting that together?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important, because it kind of breaks our expectations. It's become an awesome conversation starter.
Bet.
So I kind of thought very carefully about the name of my business, so Shibui Advisory, and people always asking me, what does Shibui mean? And so then there's a conversation, then I can talk to them about the framework, and it's a discussion about their business. And then the second bit about the book being just like a Japanese book where you read it from back to front, I wanted to break our expectation around, oh, well, this is how you read a normal book. Well, it's a Japanese concept, so why don't we write an English book in reverse? And the printers, fortunately, Stuart O'Neill, who was one of your guests and who is a director on the Just One Reason board that I chair, the suicide prevention charity, he actually put me in touch with his printers. And, for those that know, his beautiful little book is well made, incredible quality. And I loved the feel of it. And so I thought, well, maybe it wouldn't be too far of a stretch. And after I explained what I was doing, they were fine with it. I think for them, they're used to printing Japanese or even books in the Middle East are printed that way.
That's right.
But it's typically in Japanese script.
Yeah.
Watch this space. I do have a draft translation, so I will go
In
down
Japanese.
that path. Yep. Because I feel like I'd love to have these conversations in Japan and get feedback. Because as you said, there are a couple of references that have been made. Soetsu Yanagi in particular, the brainchild of the Japan Folk Craft Museum in Tokyo, he wrote most extensively on Shibui, but within other topics, mostly in the aesthetic field, so about crafts, about handmade things.
Can I go back to some of the principles? The ones that hit me when I read it was impermanence. And of course, we all know that we don't last forever. Like you intrinsically know as a human being, even though you avoid the topic for as long as you can, possibly.
Yeah.
And in a business perspective, the notion of a going concern also refers to that, right? So there's a legal and accounting term.
Absolutely.
But I suppose what struck me is I wonder how that principle impacts us as we hit midlife, and the notion of I may not be here forever. So how might that influence the way I think? That's what struck me when I read it.
Yeah.
What does impermanence mean for you?
Well, I think this is where we spend a lot of time being influenced in the modern world by America and Western ideologies. And for me, we're missing a massive opportunity to learn from our nearest neighbors in the East. And so Japanese Zen philosophy, Buddhist thought, there are so many things that in those cultures, religious contexts, prepare you better for death. Yeah, we don't talk about it, right? We were talking earlier about even suicide, but that's a taboo topic. But we need to actually talk about it in order to prepare for the eventualities that we may be touched by somebody that might be thinking of doing something that we don't want them to. Death as well. It touches us, and then we go, I got to start living every day.
Yeah.
It's too late. No, do it now. Don't wait. So don't plan for something in 5 years. Do it now. Because we've all had this experience where somebody dear to us has a freak accident or something just that was not planned happens and they're gone. So don't wait. Like, use every single opportunity that you've got to squeeze every bit of fun and laughter and enjoyment out of this thing that we call life. Because who knows when it's going to come to an end. And so impermanence, Perfect Days, that movie, is an awesome example for me of somebody that lived every day with purpose and enjoyment, and he was content. There's a great interview with the actor Koji Yakusho, and he was talking about this Japanese concept of Manzoku, and it reminds me of a TV commercial in Japan when I was 15, sitting on the couch with my host family watching telly, and there's a commercial that comes on, and the woman's sitting in a bath. Bath culture's huge in Japan, and she's relaxed and she's smiling and she's really happy, and she turns to the camera and she says, "Manzoku, manzoku." And I turned to my host father and I said, "What does manzoku mean?" And my host father was a serious man, and he turns to me and says, "Completely satisfied." And I thought, completely satisfied. That is what we should be aiming for. Not for all the riches in the world, not the next promotion, not this title, or not living in this suburb, or my kids go to this school. How do we get to a state of being manzoku? And so impermanence for me is tied directly to this sense of manzoku. So Perfect Days, he wakes up, he gets his can of coffee from the vending machine just outside his apartment block. He drives to the toilet block, he cleans the toilet, he goes to the next one. And then at lunchtime, this scene for me in the movie is key. So he takes a sandwich and a drink out of a plastic bag that he's got from the convenience store, and he sits in a public park and he looks up. And there, through the light, he's looking at the leaves. And in Japanese, they have a term for this, komorebi. So sunlight through leaves. And he pulls out an old camera with film, takes a picture, maybe another picture. Then he just sits there and takes it all in. It's being present in the now, and then not getting caught up in what might be going on in the future. And then there's one other great scene in that movie. So the two are directly tied to impermanence for me. So he's speaking to, I think, his niece, some sort of relation. And she says, "Oh, what about this and what about that?" And all worried about the future. And he turns to her, and they're riding bikes over a bridge, and he says, "Kondo wa kondo, ima wa ima." Later is later. Now is now.
I remember that.
And you just think, oh, ima wa ima. Now is now. So how do we make the most of what we're doing now? Like this moment that we're sharing now, if we did it again, it's not going to be the same as what it is now. But we enjoy this moment for what it is. Another saying, ichigo ichie, in Japanese. This moment is never going to be the same, so enjoy this one moment.
I love that. There's so much that's a whole episode just there.
It's another book.
Yeah, it's a whole other book. That's right. Are you enjoying the conversation with Matthew? He gave us 25 copies of his book, Shibui, to give to our listeners. To get one of these, go to don'tlettheoldmanin.com, leave your details, and if you are the first of the 25 people to do so, we'll send you one of these books. Back to the show. what I do know about you, and we don't know each other that long at all, but what I do know about you is you do live this, or at least you try to live this. You've told me about how you try to make something mundane a meditation, which is now is now.
Yeah.
And you told me a story about how you try to make washing the dishes a meditation for you.
Yeah.
Now that sounds bizarre to many people.
It does. Yeah.
But I am keen to hear what you actually do, and then why you do it.
Yeah. So there's a number of tricks, I guess, that Zen Buddhist priests use during meditation, and one of them is when you're washing the dishes, only think of washing the dishes. Now, the other example I use is when you're ironing, just think of the ironing. And, you're right, like, it's bizarre. What are you talking about? Like, ironing is a pain. But, the thing is, if you think something's painful, it tends to be painful. But if you think, you know what, I'm going to enjoy this moment. I'm going to wash this dish as well as I possibly can. I'm going to iron this shirt or iron this dress as best I can. And what was once a real chore, and I'll be completely honest with you, it doesn't always work, right? But before I start the task, that's my mindset. And I try as much as I possibly can to keep that mindset throughout. Now, it's a bit hard when you're ironing and then your daughter comes in and says, "Oh, what are you doing? Can you help me with this?" And you're like, "I was just ironing and enjoying the ironing," But, but
that's the human part of it.
It is. Yeah. And look, it's also the perfect, imperfect thing. Like, I just think that we put so much pressure on ourselves for everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
And life ain't perfect.
You've now helped me understand a story that our mutual friend, Stuart O'Neill, who we will talk about, I'm sure, said to me once. He said, when I'm traveling the States with Matthew, we're going to different meetings, he irons my clothes for me. Now, I thought that was a reflection of him, but now I realize, no, it's for you to do more.
It is. And it's also a reflection of the fact that I can't let him leave looking like how he proposed to look. But I have a very funny story. I mean, Stuart's such a character, an amazing human being, but we couldn't be more opposite when it comes to being organized and having things just so. So despite the fact that I've said, we should embrace imperfection, there are perfectionist streaks within me that I have to manage from time to time. But, we recently traveled together and I always pack a really tight backpack or briefcase, and I just pull my shirts out and they're already ironed. The way I fold them doesn't necessitate a re-iron. Well, Stuart pulls his shirt out in a ball and I'm like, what is that? "Oh yeah, this is what I'm wearing to dinner." "Give it to me, I will iron it." So it's actually very useful.
So that moment was less meditative for you?
Well, I think, the whole time I was ironing it, thinking, I can't believe he was just about to wear this, I have to fix this. Okay, I'm ironing.
Speaking of Stuart, we have interviewed Stuart.
Yeah.
It was one of the most important interviews we've done in this series because the topic is one of the most important topics. And I've been to Deepwater Pub,
the top
pub, where a lot of his work originates and inspires from.
Yeah.
How did you get involved and why did you get involved is probably the bigger question.
It's a funny story. So my father-in-law lives about 10 minutes from the top pub in Deepwater. So we were visiting him. Okay. We stayed at the hotel and we were going to have dinner the first night at the pub. It just so happened, and having lived in Melbourne, mad AFL supporter,
It's Australian Football League for those folks who are not Australian.
Richmond Tigers. And in actual fact, it was a funny story. As I was walking to the studio this morning, a guy says to me, "Oh, you've got something on your backpack. I think a bird may have pooed on your backpack." And I turned around and I looked, and it's the Richmond Tigers insignia, and he's like laughing as he walks off. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, good one.
And killed the fan.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, I walked into the pub ahead of the family just to make sure that dinner was ready, and we had plans sorted. And I was going to go back to the room and watch the Tigers on the streaming service, because I'm in rural, regional New South Wales. There's no way I'm going to get the AFL. Well, I walk into the pub and there's the Tigers game on the big screen. I'm thinking, what is going on here? So I walk up to the pub, and I didn't know Stuart at the time. Stuart's behind the bar, and I said, "What's going on with the Tigers on the screen?" And he goes, "It's my pub. If they don't like it, they can go elsewhere." I went, "I'm a mad Tiger supporter. This is awesome. Can I please have a beer?" And he goes, "Well, if you're a Tiger supporter, you drink for free."
You drink for free?
Yeah. I'm like, this is getting better and better. Like, pinch me. Am I dreaming? And so then we just started talking from there, and he told me all of the work that he and his partner Susie had done, and not just the pub, but also the book. And I just said to him the next day, I said, "We should be doing this through a charity. This can't be through your own goodwill." And, I just think it's an incredibly powerful toolkit that most people should have in their back pocket, because you never know when you're going to need it. And I think, to our earlier conversation, we don't spend enough time figuring out who we are and what we want. And so when we have difficulties in life, where do we go? Mm-hmm. And so this little toolkit, little diary, is an incredible companion. And so, I'm incredibly proud to chair that board, and we're looking to get more of those books in more hands. So if people want to support the cause, justonereason.org.au.
I'm delighted we did that, because as I said to you before we recorded today, we've had loads of messages come to us on our website and emails and whatever else about the impact of that episode. I think it's our second highest from a social perspective in terms of Facebook. Brilliant. And social. Is just
awesome.
It's just grabbing a lot of attention. And I know at least one CEO of one corporate organization has reached out to say, how can we help?
Yeah,
and that's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
So it's a really important one. So as I said to you earlier on, we weren't sure whether we would, because it's a topic that's difficult to talk about. It triggers many listeners, but it's too important a topic to not talk about. Yeah. So I'm glad we did.
Every 9 minutes, someone is contemplating suicide in this country. Every 9 minutes. That's over 58,000 people a year. That is a massive challenge and a massive problem for our society.
Yeah, and it's not unique to Australia. It's every Western country.
It's getting worse. Yeah. So we need to figure out how we solve it. And, kind of, once again, how do we simplify it? This simple, effective toolkit has been very effective. So, we want to get it out there.
I want to bring this towards our final area of conversation, and you've used the word simple just now. There's a concept in Japanese called shibusa, the notion of elegant simplicity. Mm-hmm. And it's often associated with the way things become more beautiful as they weather, as they old. And I remember when I first came across that idea, thought how different that is in terms of how we think of aging in the Western world. We think of aging as almost a degradation, almost something to be avoided. But that concept in Japan is actually, there's an elegance, there's a beauty to this. And when you go to Japan, the notion of eldership is embraced more than any other country I've ever been in. With all of that in mind, what matters to you now as you get older? What's becoming more important for you What's becoming more elegant or simplistic in your mind
Yeah.
that you're grateful for?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm grateful for so much. But I think it all comes back to, for me, family. That unit that greets you every morning and says goodnight before bed. That without that, I think I would have a very different life. And so anything that I can do to enrich those relationships, challenge, encourage creativity. I mean, I think that's probably why books for me are so important. Like, I feel like we are talking about the good things that we have access to. We have access to every incredible thought leader, both now and past. It's on our fingertips. Now, I'm not a huge digital reader. Like you have to have a physical copy.
Smell the book.
Yeah, feel the book.
Yeah.
Dog ear the pages.
Yeah.
Write notes sometimes even. And so for me, I think it's always about, how can I always be learning? Is there something that somebody else has done elsewhere that's better? One of the chairs of Vanguard often said this. He said, Jack Brennan was his name, is his name. You have to be perpetually, positively dissatisfied. And when I was applying that in the business, my team will probably reflect, my former team would reflect that times I probably forgot the positive sometimes. It's like, oh, this is going to be fixed. Like, how do we turn this around? But I think that mindset, that coupled with being frugal, being careful with money, the Jack Bogle approach to investing and living, and almost stoic philosophy, that is a real guiding force for me as well. And so I think any which way you can get your hands on a book, I always say to my kids, I don't really care however many books you want. Like, when we go to the bookshop, I'll get them for you, because my parents were exactly the same. My host family were exactly the same. If I can encourage that learning, and I often reflect with my wife when I come into the kitchen area, I'm just about to get dinner ready and the kids are both on the lounge reading a book, I kind of look at her going, good job.
Good job. Yeah, we sorted that. One of my favorite poets is American poet Mary Oliver.
Mm.
And one of my favorite lines from her is, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I know it's been quoted many, many times, but I often come back to it. What would a 75-year-old version of you be saying to you now in terms of your one and precious life is moving? What would they want you to be doing?
I was talking to you about this question. I think this is such a challenging question. And just to add some levity, I did share the question with my 6-year-old. And I said, oh, what would you say to this question? She goes, 75? Are you still going to be alive? I thought, I hope so.
And you would want me too.
So, look, I think it would be, did you make sure you had fun? Did you laugh? Because if I think about key moments in my life, when I'm laughing and having fun, they're the most precious moments. Like, I think, even saying that, I think of this one moment when my sister-in-law and her son came around for dinner. We have a long table and we're all sitting around the table, and my kids love like most kids, love pasta. So I made them pasta. And then we're singing this song that they play in play school, Mangia la pasta, and we're all laughing and just having an amazing time. And so for me, those family moments, I cherish those family moments. And so I think about maybe the 75-year-old me saying, did you continue to commit to the 6 o'clock dinner time with your family every day? And if I can say mostly yes, then I think I've done the right thing and I lived a fulfilled life.
Fantastic. Matthew, it's been a pleasure having you here. I really enjoyed and still enjoy the elegance and simplicity of your book.
Thank you.
And more importantly, the principles that come out of that,
Yeah,
right, that
I
permeate
appreciate
everything.
that.
What would be your final words of wisdom for anyone listening to you today?
We've talked a lot about the hard things. Try and find a way for the hard things to be easy, because planning now will set you up for success in the future, and it's not going to be as hard. And so just take the time to really think carefully about, and if that question of why have you been put on this planet, what are your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations for the future is too big, then start by clearly articulating or writing down what you don't like, and then get them out of your life. Because I find it easier to stop doing certain things. It's the same with business. Businesses get involved in so many things that aren't part of their core purpose. So one of the things that I do as part of my first engagements, just review everything, and then I just show it back to the owners. And with fresh eyes, people are like, yeah, we've known that. We need to do something about it.
Yep.
And do it. Don't talk about it. Just do it.
It reminds me of an interview I heard my favorite performer, Bono, once.
Mm-hmm.
It's about every time they record a new album, the starting point is, what do we not want to do?
Yeah.
'Cause that's easier to answer.
Absolutely.
New parts did more, but we start there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Matthew Lumsden, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks for listening or watching, depending which platform you're accessing this podcast on. I hope you enjoyed it. I really got a lot from that conversation. And I will record a short episode next on what I've learned, my thoughts on the conversation, some reflections. And I'm going to do an experiment based upon what I've learned today. So you'll hear about that in the next episode. If you want a permanent reminder of what we chatted about or some of the key summary points, go to don'tlettheoldmanin.com/reflections and download that. In the meantime, don't let the old man in. We'll see you next time.